It's May Value Days at Woolworths with savings for everyone.
Man, that hurt. Like you, I need quality parts at the right price. And at Western Auto, we guarantee it.
Shopping trips in the 1980s were fun. Whether you went alone or tagged along with your parents, you had your favorite store. They had everything from electronics to groceries, furniture, and more, but sadly, they're now gone forever. Today, we'll take a trip back in time to remember 13 iconic stores from the 1980s that couldn't be saved. And watch until the end, because your favorite store may be on this list. If you lived in this decade, you can relate to children racing to Woolworths with pockets full of change. This high street icon was where you could find anything from clothing to toys, comics, and Christmas magic. It was part of every child's life. But by the 1980s, things had begun to take a dark turn. The company was struggling. The U.S. parent was sold out, leaving the U.K. branch to battle for survival. It was like a teenager trying to figure out their life but failing. Instead of bouncing back, more stores began to close. Competition was fierce and Woolworth couldn't bear it. Rivals like Argos and new chains like Poundland were pulling shoppers away, and Woolworths tried reinventing itself by opening hypermarkets and narrowing products, but it just didn't work. To make matters worse, rent would skyrocket to an eye-watering $160 million. A struggling company can't raise that much money, and the last straw was the recession and credit crunch. The company drowned in debt, and by 2008, Woolworths was in administration. 800 stores closed and over 30,000 workers lost their jobs. Shoppers may have been sad, but couldn't save their favorite store. And just like that, the Woolworths era came to an end. Would it ever make a comeback? Although there were rumors, it's simply not true. The store is gone forever, and we're only left with nostalgic memories. Toys R Us. In the 1980s, we had Toys R Us. Children loved you if you took them to this store to get their favorite toys. It was the ultimate childhood dreamland. But where did it all go wrong? The success story starts with founder Charles Lazarus, who rode the baby boom to create a toy empire. By the 90s, Toys R Us was the king of toys. The giant had forced other smaller stores out of business, and it expanded internationally, opening stores in Japan. But like every empire, it had enemies. The big guys like Target and Walmart came knocking, and after that, Toys R Us lost a case that exposed its shady dealings. It was just too much pressure to bear. They had an opportunity to come back. In the year 2000, they partnered with Amazon to handle online sales instead of building an e-commerce empire. Amazon outsmarted them and stole the playbook. Debts would pile up until Toys R Us couldn't bear it anymore. By 2017, they announced a $5 billion debt and filed for bankruptcy. Toys R Us would close its doors and broke many hearts. Children still mourn its demise to this day. Maybe you remember this store. What was your favorite memory? Let me know in the comments below. Service merchandise. Remember when it was fun to flip through the catalog as a kid? You could circle all the cool stuff you dreamed of easily, and that's where service merchandise comes in. The retail giant brought wish lists to life. In 1943, Schoenberg and Zimmerman's wholesale company went from selling toys and glassware to opening its first catalog showroom in Nashville in 1960. You could walk into the store, pick out what you wanted from a catalog, and wait for it to slide out on a conveyor belt. This was the future of shopping. Under Zimmerman's leadership in the 70s, service merchandise boomed. It even made the Fortune 500 list, and at its peak, the store was the largest catalog showroom retailer in the United States. But like many fantastic stores, there was an end. The shifting retail world and stiff competition caught up with them, and by 1999, the company was in debt and filed for bankruptcy. It closed all 150 stores, leaving thousands of employees jobless, and managed to stay relevant until 2002 when the lights finally went on. Could they have handled the challenges better? Well, perhaps. They just gave up too fast. Electric Avenue. Electric Avenue introduced flashy electronics in 1987. The store began inside select Ward locations, but quickly became a hit, and the following year there were over 130 Electric Avenue places, some of which had standalone specialty stores. The special thing about Electric Avenue was that you could find everything cool, from gadgets to stereos, televisions, and tech. It was a #1 place for tech lovers in the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately, that excitement died down years later. In 1993, Ward's hit the brakes on its standalone stores to focus on full-line Ward stores. Then it switched gears in 1994, creating Electric Avenue and more. The new chain sold electronics, furniture, and jewelry, and was a blending of tech and home goods. By 1997, Montgomery Ward was in financial trouble and had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Electric Avenue and more, including other chains they owned, were shut down and liquidated, and the brand has faded into memory with some signs still in Ward stores. They shut down completely in 2001, and it was fun while it lasted. Kmart. Once upon a time, Kmart was the place to be. It all begins in 1899 with the first store that opened in Detroit. Everyday items were sold at the brand new store. Fast forward to the 1960s, and Kmart had upgraded to selling discounted products. After all, who doesn't love a good deal from their favorite store? Kmart soon became a household name and opened its first store under the Kmart brand in 1962. They changed to Kmart Corporation in 1977, and by the 80s and early 90s it was at the top of its game with nearly 2,500 stores, second only to Sears. But then fate would take place. They tried to be everything to everyone all at once, and it became a disaster. Rivals like Walmart and Target stole their customers faster than they could say jack. The reason would be simple. Kmart didn't hop on the tech train fast enough at a time when online shopping was becoming popular. You have to remember, they had bad investments as well. Buying Sports Authority and Borders books didn't help. Kmart eventually gave up in 2002, filing for bankruptcy, and it was the biggest retailer to do so at the time. Eddie Lampert was excited to intervene and merge Kmart with Sears. The 2008 recession finished off what was left of the company, and they declared bankruptcy one final time in 2018. The Sharper Image. The Sharper Image was another futuristic store that everyone thought would last longer. It all begins in 1977 when they started selling jogging watches, and years later it had become known for massage chairs, electronics, and the infamous iconic Breeze air purifier. By the early 2000s they had 187 stores. But of course, the trouble came, and it began in 2003 when Consumer Reports made a shocking revelation claiming the iconic Breeze air purifier didn't actually clean the air. In fact, it may have actually done more bad than good. The backlash became terrible, and Sharper Image lost the lawsuit, facing an investor class action suit. Customers were angry and withdrew their patronage. Although leadership had changed hands, it would not be enough to stop the disaster. Things became worse in 2008 when stock prices fell to 29 cents a share, and Sharper Image was pushed out of the NASDAQ with over $199 million in debt. The company then filed for bankruptcy and shuttered all of its stores after that. Western Auto. How do you feel shopping from a store with a little bit of everything? Western Auto made that magic years ago, a one-stop shop for tires, radios, parts, and even bicycles. George Pepperdine started Western Auto in 1921. After finding a loophole, he established a mail-order business for the booming auto industry. Aside from car parts, they sold other branded goodies, and believe it or not, they were ahead of their time. Fast forward to the 1980s when Sears swept them off their feet, and by the 90s, the auto parts division was sold to Advance Auto Parts. Western Auto couldn't keep up online shopping as giants took over. It was too late to replicate the technology. Retail powerhouses like Amazon, Shine, and Temu have squeezed the life out of online shopping, and there's still hope for upcoming retailers. Build slowly and you might become the next Amazon. Western Auto may have faded into history, but the nostalgia of shopping remains. Radio Shack. Raise your hands if you got your electronic goods from Radio Shack. Radio Shack had everything from ham radios to portable CD players in the 90s. The store allowed you to fuel your tech obsession with ease, but then everything changed. The 2000s was a challenging decade for businesses, especially for Radio Shack. Competitors like Best Buy, Amazon, and Walmart stole the show with cheaper prices and diverse products, and Radio Shack stood its ground by diversifying into satellite services and cell phones, implementing the store-within-a-store idea. But in the end, it just wasn't enough. Prices were too high and the focus was narrow. Meanwhile, big retailers like Walmart sold everything you could think of, and to top it off, they slashed prices and sold at unbelievable rates. How Radio Shack expected to survive, nobody knew. Bankruptcy hit them twice, General Wireless operations took over, but they could not save the day. The store was stuck selling specialty electronics while the rest of the world had moved on. As expected, rivals outpaced Radio Shack, and the rest would be history. What do you miss the most about Radio Shack? Let me know in the comments below. Sam Goody. Sam Goody was a music paradise for many over the decades. Sam Goodowitz opened up his first record shop in New York in the 1940s, and it soon became a legend of music-loving college kids. By the 80s and 90s, Sam Goody stores were everywhere. Thanks to Musicland, it was one of the biggest American retailers with over 800 stores, and much like Radio Shack and Woolworths, they hit a brick wall. In 2001, Best Buy bought Musicland, hoping to turn Sam Goody into a tech shop for youths, but it became an unmitigated disaster. Declining sales and increasing competition from new digital music platforms would smash their hopes and dreams, and by 2006, Sam Goody had become bankrupt. They renamed most of their stores, and although a few of them remained, the brand would slowly fade away. Most of what was left of Sam Goody was sold off in 2020, and the nostalgic store reminds everyone of the good old days. They may have been gone, but they're not forgotten. Walden Books. Bookstores were interesting homes of endless stories, and the stores like Walden Books were at the top of the list. They opened during the Great Depression when Lawrence Hoyt and Melvin Kafka started to rent out books. They gave them out for 3 cents a day. Fast forward to 1962 and the first Walden Books store opened up in Pittsburgh. By the 70s, Walden Books was everywhere. All of its 250 stores across the country sold affordable paperbacks to book lovers, and in 1984, Kmart would buy the brand, making it the largest bookstore chain. Under their leadership, Walden Books had tried software stores, discount book outlets, and educational toy shops, and they even tried their hands on superstores. It didn't take long for chains like Borders, who loomed large, to edge them out. Walden Books grew increasingly weak until merging with Borders in 1994. The chain slowly dwindled as it tried to keep pace in the digital age, and many of the stores would rebrand as Borders Express. It would not be enough. Walden Books' life would end in 2011 when the Borders Group liquidated, and it was the end of a chapter in bookstore history. Eckerd. The next store takes us back to 1898 when Joseph Eckerd opened a small drugstore in Erie, Pennsylvania. Unknown to him, he was laying the foundation for a pharmacy empire. Eckerd expanded and spread to the south and beyond thanks to his son Jack. Jack had helped to grow the business in Florida in the 1950s. J.C. Penney then bought out the chain in 1997, merging it with their thrift drugstores, and initially it seemed like a good idea. But the stores had fallen behind in the digital age, and by the early 2000s, Eckerd had over 2,800 stores across the United States with 1-hour photo labs. As time changed, so did Eckerd's fortune. CVS and another group later split the chain, and CVS converted stores to their own brand. In 2006, Rite Aid took over, and by 2007, Eckerd was a distant memory. The familiar blue Eckerd signs disappeared, being replaced with Rite Aid's branding, and the century-old legacy came to an end in the twinkle of an eye. A&P. In 1859, the Great American Tea Company in New York opened their doors. The young men sold tea from clipper ships, and by the 1870s they became the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. Soon, A&P stores were everywhere in America, and by the 1920s there were over 14,000 of the stores alone. A&P became the largest grocery chain in the country, but the success story doesn't end there. They first opened a supermarket in 1936 and bought other food chains like Farmer Jack, Waldbaum's, and Kohl's food stores in the 1980s. They were so successful they held private label products like the Ann Page line, and at its peak, A&P seemed to be untouchable. But this is not about untouchable stores. A&P's downfall began in 1973 when Safeway took the lead, followed by Kroger. It was the beginning of the end for America's biggest retailer. Germany's Tengelmann stepped in as the company struggled, but they couldn't do much, and A&P filed for bankruptcy in 2010, but even tried to bounce back. After that, another bankruptcy came in 2015, and 1 year later, all of the stores would be closed. Have you ever shopped at A&P? What do you miss about the store? Tower Records. Imagine a time when listening to your favorite song meant driving to a record store. Tower Records was founded by Russ Solomon and was a temple for music lovers. It had over 200 stores worldwide, and music legends like Elton John were regulars. He visited occasionally to grab a boxload of records, and rest assured that if Tower didn't have it, no other store did. We all thought that they were indispensable. As the digital wave took over, Tower tried to go global. It took a $110 million loan, but proved to be a bad idea. Big box stores like Walmart and Best Buy sold CDs at a cheaper rate, and MP3 and Napster would change everything. Then came Apple's iTunes and the iPod, which made getting music much easier. Tower lost $90 million when Apple's innovation came on board, and the store filed for bankruptcy in 2006, bringing an ending to its chapter for good. Which of these iconic stores from the 1980s do you miss? Let me know all about it in the comments down below. Also, be sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you never miss another great memory in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.